Richard's life unravels when a DNA test reveals that the two children he has cherished and raised are not biologically his. Richard sat in his study, a mahogany room filled with books and mementos from a life meticulously curated. He had always considered himself a man of reason, grounded and unshaken. But on this particular evening, reason had abandoned him, leaving a tempest of emotions in its wake. His hands trembled as he held a thin sheet of paper, the results of a DNA test that unraveled the foundation of his world. The day had started like any other. Richard had breakfast with his wife, Emily, and their two children, Lucy and Ethan. Lucy, a bright and imaginative 9-year-old, had been eagerly discussing her latest science project, while Ethan, 6, proudly displayed a drawing he had made at school. Richard had smiled, his heart full, as he kissed Emily goodbye and headed to work. The test had been an innocent curiosity. Richard's colleague had recently delved into genealogy, inspiring Richard to explore his own roots. When the kit arrived in the mail, he thought it would be a fun family activity. Lucy and Ethan had giggled as they swabbed their cheeks, Emily playfully rolling her eyes but participating nonetheless. It was a trivial exercise, or so he thought. The results arrived 2 weeks later. Richard eagerly logged into the portal, expecting to find some long-lost connection to royalty or an intriguing heritage. What he found instead was a stark and undeniable truth. Neither Lucy nor Ethan shared his DNA. At first, he thought it must be a mistake. He refreshed the page, read the instructions again, and even considered contacting customer support. But the numbers didn't lie. The conclusion was inescapable. The children he had raised, loved, and cherished were not biologically his. Richard sat frozen for what felt like hours. The revelation gnawed at him, filling his mind with questions. Who was their father? How long had Emily known? Had their entire marriage been a lie? When Emily returned home that evening, Richard's demeanor immediately betrayed him. She set down the grocery bags and studied him with concern. "Richard, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. He couldn't find the words. Instead, he handed her the printout. She glanced at it, her face turning pale as understanding dawned. "Richard," she began, her voice trembling, "I can explain." "Explain?" he repeated, his voice rising. "Explain how the children I've called my own for years aren't mine? How you—" He stopped himself, taking a deep breath to steady the anger threatening to consume him. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "It was before us," she said softly. "Before we were serious. I didn't know for sure until after Lucy was born. By then, you were already her father in every way that mattered. I didn't want to destroy that." Richard stared at her, his mind racing. He had met Emily in their late 20s, a whirlwind romance that had quickly turned into marriage. They'd had their struggles, like any couple, but he had always believed in their bond. Now, he questioned everything. "And Ethan?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily hesitated. "The same. It was the same man." "Who is he?" Richard demanded. Emily looked away, silent. "Who is he, Emily?" he repeated more forcefully. She finally met his gaze. "His name is Michael. We had a brief relationship before I met you. He doesn't know about the children. I made that decision because I believed you were their father in every way that counted." Richard's mind reeled. He felt betrayed, not just by Emily, but by the life he thought he had built. Yet as his anger swelled, so did another emotion. Love. The faces of Lucy and Ethan filled his mind. Their laughter, their milestones, the nights he had spent comforting them, none of that was erased by DNA. "Do they know?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "Number. And I hope they never would. You're their father, Richard. You've always been." The words hung in the air. Richard thought about the trust that had been broken and the years of love and memories that could never be undone. He didn't know if he could forgive Emily, but he did know one thing. Lucy and Ethan were his children no matter what. Over the following weeks, Richard grappled with his feelings. He sought therapy, confided in a close friend, and spent countless sleepless nights reflecting. Emily gave him space, understanding the gravity of her actions. In time, Richard came to a decision. One evening, as the family sat together watching a movie, he looked at Lucy and Ethan, their faces lit up with joy. He realized that they were his world, his legacy. DNA didn't define fatherhood. Love did. Taking Emily aside later that night, he told her, "I'm staying. For them. For us. But we need to rebuild what's been broken." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do whatever it takes." The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but Richard knew one thing for sure. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to stay, to fight, and to heal. And for Lucy and Ethan, he would do exactly that.